Hi, I'm Karthik, and this session is on creating a software prototype. Now, suppose you have a software product. Once you have fleshed out the solution concept and you've confirmed that it resonates with users, it is tempting to proceed directly to the product development phase. This approach can be costly though, because while your product concept might appeal to the user, the actual product might not meet user expectations, either because of a poor user experience or because of missing functionality. The purpose of prototyping is to ensure that we minimize the need to completely redo the software due to gaps in how we implement some high-level solution concept we have in mind. I'm going to start by discussing the different approaches to prototyping and use a few examples to illustrate how to select an approach that is right for you. And finally, I will close with a simple illustration of how you, the entrepreneur, can get involved with prototyping your software even if you have no graphic design experience. But first, why should we even bother to prototype? Prototyping serves two main purposes. The first is to clarify user interface to the user and also to the developer who's going to eventually implement the product. Second, prototyping also helps to clarify the functionality that will be supported in the eventual product. Doing so provides several benefits that will help your project in the long run. It will help to reduce costs and time relative to building the full product and then iterating after having built that product. It's better to clarify requirements up front rather than redoing costly development again and again. Also, you don't need to be a developer to get involved in prototyping. So you can involve other stakeholders such as non-engineering co-founders into the product discussions during the prototyping phase. And finally, prototyping can also help increase product quality by ensuring that the user interface and the user experience are clear before we embark on product development. Before we discuss how to prototype, it's useful to understand what are the different types of prototypes one can develop. Prototypes can be classified along multiple dimensions. The first one I'll discuss is whether the prototype is a throwaway prototype or an evolutionary prototype. The idea behind throwaway prototyping is to create a model of the final system that the user can evaluate. Once user feedback is obtained, the design and requirements are frozen. Development begins and the prototype may be discarded at this phase. This is a relatively fast method of prototyping, and it allows the user to experience all the important parts of the system before sharing feedback. The second approach is evolutionary prototyping, which, as the name suggests, involves building only those portions of the system that we understand and then slowly working our way to the other portions over time. The idea is that the development team creates a system with the features that are well understood, and the prototype in fact evolves to become the final product. For most of our discussion, I'll focus on throwaway prototyping because of its speed, the ability to give users a full sense of the system, and also the ability for us to proceed without formally starting development. Another interesting dimension is the fidelity of the prototype. The fidelity can range from low to high with many choices in between. Low fidelity prototypes are typically hand-drawn sketches. The advantage of this is that it's fast, and it's also useful early on when you can iterate through multiple designs. One can consider many options without actually slowing down with a low fidelity option. The other end of the spectrum is a high fidelity design. This is almost a what you see is what you get type of design. It comes complete with full visual design, and therefore you need a graphic designer in order to come up with a full fidelity design. The advantage of a full fidelity design is that it's easy for a user to understand what we're trying to build. It's also easy for a software developer to take a full fidelity or a high fidelity design and start coding. The approach is helpful when the product is complex and it's hard for a user to visualize the system, or also when it's critical to have the developer fully understand the user experience design before actually coding. But on the other hand, it may be an overkill for simple software projects, and because it's also expensive, so it's important to ask if it's needed to do a full fidelity design before actually proceeding. Finally, the option in between high and low fidelity designs is medium fidelity. This achieves good balance between the speed of low fidelity and the realism of high fidelity. In this slide, I present several prototypes of varying fidelity for a website of a children's educational product called SmartyPal that I previously co-founded. You can see how we started with a low fidelity sketch and slowly worked our way to a high fidelity design complete with all the visual elements. A third way to classify prototypes is based on the level of interactivity supported. On the one hand, you have static prototypes, which are essentially just a series of screens. On the other hand, you have interactive prototypes. These prototypes react to user inputs. An interactive prototype is clickable and allows the user to enter input into forms. In a sense, an interactive prototype simulates how the final product will work in a very realistic fashion. In selecting between a static or an interactive prototype, it is useful to reflect why you're prototyping in the first place. Is the product relatively complex to understand? Is the user experience a key point of differentiation for the product? Or is it important to understand how the application actually works and how one interacts with it? If so, these are best achieved through interactive prototypes. In general, my experience suggests that interactive prototypes are always better unless the product is relatively simple and the goal of the prototype is mainly to clarify visual design. If so, a static prototype might work just fine. For example, if the product itself is a series of static pages, then a static prototype will probably just suffice. The next question worth asking is, what is the best tool to use for prototyping? The answer depends a bit on the answers to the previous questions I raised about the different types of prototypes. If a low fidelity static prototype is right for you, then a paper and a pen are all you need. Your prototype will consist of hand-drawn sketches. If you're seeking to make medium or high fidelity but static for prototypes, then drawing or photo editing tools like Photoshop, Visio, or even PowerPoint or SmartArt in Microsoft Word will suffice. If you're looking to make medium or high fidelity and interactive prototypes, then wireframing tools like Balsamiq and Axure are appropriate. Finally, if you're a developer and want to directly proceed with evolutionary prototypes, then development tools like Visual Studio and Eclipse are appealing options. One practical tip I would offer is to develop an initial prototype that is static and of low or medium fidelity. You use that prototype to get initial feedback from users. Once you have that feedback, you go back and develop interactive prototypes of medium to high fidelity. You use this prototype to get feedback and you iterate until you're satisfied with the design. At this point, you freeze design and we're ready to proceed to development. If you're not a designer, it's tempting to outsource the prototyping work to a designer. You should certainly lean on designers, but as the founder of a software startup, it is helpful to be actively involved in the prototyping phase. One way to do that is to take the lead with developing the low fidelity designs. I'm now going to illustrate how simple it is to get started. Suppose I'm working on a photography or videography focused website that offers subscribers access to great videos and interviews in which professionals teach us how to use cameras, frame our subjects, and shoot the best photos and videos. Now I'm trying to design a landing page for this website. I'm going to show you how we can develop good low fidelity designs in fairly short order. I'll start with a classic design which I often use. So let me start here. So right on top for my header, I'm going to use a logo here, maybe a one-liner on the company. Then I add a few links for the product, resources, free resources, and other such things. Now for the main content on the landing page, because it's a website on videography and photography, I might want to use a video to explain what this website is all about and also to feature some customer testimonials. Next, I might actually have a quote from a customer here, and then below that, a call to action asking the user to sign up. All right, below that, maybe I might want to say a little bit about the product. So we might say why we built, whatever our name is, XYZ. And here we might want to say a little bit more about our product. So some features about the product, we might say, hey, we had the same problem that you guys had. Then we might go on to say, we found there's no solution out there that takes us from the beginning to the end, and that's what we're trying to do for you. And then we might further say, hey, we have professionals, and these professionals have tricks that they can teach all of us. And so we might say that here, and that's the next section. And then finally, we might just have the footer of the page where we might have information about us, or perhaps contact us and things like that. Now, the reason I like this design is because, as I mentioned, this website is about photography and videography education, and we're using a video to convey that value proposition. But suppose I find the video is too expensive to shoot, or I don't have enough time to shoot that video. I'm now going to consider another design that is an alternative to using that video. Now, suppose I wanted to try a design without any videos, maybe because the videos are too expensive to shoot, or it slows me down and I want to get the website up and running soon. So I'm going to try a similar design this time with no videos in there. So for the header, once again, I have a logo, a one-liner about the company, a few links for products, resources. And now I might have a customer testimonial here. And because I'm not going to use a video, maybe I'm going to use a photograph of an actual customer who gave us that testimonial. And then below that, this time maybe I want to emphasize the ease of use of the product instead of why we built it. And so I might have a section that says 3 easy steps to use whatever our product's name is. So step 1, here's the step. Step 2, here's what you're supposed to do. Step 3, and then I might show that visually this is step 1, and then step 2 says what you're supposed to do there, and then step 3, so I've got 3 easy steps. And then finally I have a footer for the website, and the footer might have about us, I don't know, contact us, perhaps our Facebook link, and things like that. Now I have a design where I have managed to eliminate the video, but what I don't like about this is that it's not particularly emotional. So maybe I want to use a photograph, but not just somebody's face with their testimonial, but instead I want a different design, something that's more emotional, and something that emphasizes a little more about product features so as to convince you to pay for this service. So I'm going to try a slightly different design to try and do that. So I'm going to try a slightly different design. The header is similar with the logo and a bunch of links. Now maybe this time I go for the top of the page just being a full screen image of some sort, and it just is some sort of a photograph that shows a photographer having a great time shooting a subject and just showing how easy it is to shoot. And it says something like, take control of your camera or something of that sort. Some tagline that conveys how easy it is, and we show an image of somebody who's very happy doing what he's doing. Next, I want to also, in addition to doing something that is more emotional and persuasive, I also want to emphasize the product features and convince you to pay. And so in order to do that, I want to show you we have lots of features. So maybe over here, I show you a bunch of features. So this is designed for you, and we might have, feature 1, a little bit about that feature. We have feature 2, expert interviews, a little bit about that. We have feature 3, a little bit about that feature. And maybe just because I want you to pay, I want to show you that we have lots of great features. So I'm going to show you the top 6 features. This might not be the greatest idea. You might show it to a user, and the user might react and say, wow, that's a lot of information for me to digest, in which case you'll bring it down to 3 or 4 of the most important features. But I'm just getting started with some design. And after this, I feel like even though I got rid of the customer testimonial, it's not at the top of the page, I feel like it's got to be somewhere, because if someone's going to pay me to join this service, it helps to know somebody else tried it and they loved it. So maybe at the bottom, I'm going to insert my customer testimonial, and I have the quote from the customer, and then I have this big sign up now call to action, and that's pretty much my third design. And as you can see, each of these designs were developed in a matter of minutes, and that's the whole idea of low fidelity prototyping. It's rapid. You can come up with several dozen prototypes and then determine which one you really like, and then show a bunch of these to your user, and then figure out which ones you want to invest in more and apply visual design to. As you can see, it's pretty easy to get involved with low fidelity prototyping. This is obviously not the final output, but it allows you, the entrepreneur, to have a meaningful conversation with both your designer and your users. And that's the value of low fidelity prototypes. And I highly advocate every entrepreneur, even those with zero design skills, to get involved in the prototyping phase, at least with the early phase of low fidelity prototyping.